Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Good evening. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Here.
Mr. Coogan?
Here.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hetzler?
Here.
Mr. Corey?
Here.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Correa?
Here, and a salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag,
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have anyone signed up for citizen input time tonight, so we're going to go right into the recognition awards, and there are none this evening as well, and we'll go right to the superintendent's report.
So first and foremost, I just want to bring to the committee's attention that we've been really doing a lot of focus around the issue of crisis management, not just in how we respond to crisis immediately, but Dr. Dargan and her team have put together a crisis response team, which allows us to bring in the social emotional side of crisis response in a very expedited manner. So that team's been meeting, we've been debriefing, figuring out how we can improve. At the same time, we also want to point out that we've been able to really work with our partners and the other school entities in the city, and that's been outstanding, particularly Diamond. So really helping and working together, and we've just done some great PD around trauma response and trauma management with those entities. At the same time, the bullying committee has met and talked about the work around SEL in general. We have a second meeting this week on Wednesday. We do have upcoming school committee subcommittee meetings. We have a special ed, an alt ed subcommittee meeting. We have an instructional subcommittee meeting, and of course, we have the finance subcommittee meetings. I'm very excited to say today that the professional development day of February 1 was absolutely outstanding. I can tell you that not only was it well attended by everyone who was there, but the feedback that we received from all of our educators doing this event in the Durfee facility allows everyone to be together. So the trainings were outstanding. I thought the lunch was great, of course, some good team building, and then of course we had we gave out some awards, and we had the commissioner come and give a keynote. And I appreciate the members of the committee who were able to show their support that day, but it was a wonderful day, and I look forward to the next one already, thinking about how we can outdo what we did on February 1. And then the final part of my comments for tonight is that we have to honor one of our own, and that is student school committee member Kyle Neves, who has been granted the DAR, Daughters of the Revolution, is that right? Did I get that one right? Citizens Award. So, I like to say that our good citizen, Kyle Neves, won this award, was awarded this, and will be going out to receive his award in a luncheon in the, when is it?
Wednesday.
This coming week?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully it won't snow too hard out there in Western Mass. You going all the way to Northampton?
Yeah.
Outstanding. So when you go out there and understand, you know, what it means to be a representative, someone that is a good citizen, you really encapsulate all of that. Not only your work on the New Durfee project, but also the building committee, your work in student government, your help with the bullying, and your work on the school committee. You're a well-rounded guy. Your parents did an amazing job raising a wonderful son. And as a dad, you're the kind of guy that I like my own son to grow up to be, and I look forward to continue having a relationship with you as you go out in the world and be fierce and conquer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, I am done with my report.
Mr. Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. One of the reasons why I became so interested in being on the school board is the development of good spirit in our community. And I just want to recognize two things in the superintendent's report that denoted that. Firstly, he said for the mid-year PD, we had a heck of a rally at Durfee High School in the auditorium, and what I saw there that day was astounding. I saw a true display of spirit. I saw it coming from our superintendent. I saw it disseminated amongst our entire staff. I felt the spirit inside the auditorium. I want to hand it to you all of you that are sitting there tonight, and everybody that works in our district for working so hard and knowing that the work is hard, but yet exemplifying that great spirit that will carry us forward. I'd like to really applaud the superintendent for his efforts on rallying that spirit. Thank you very much, Superintendent. Thank you. And for the young man sitting at the end of the table, I knew him when he was in elementary school. So for a guy like me to see the position that he's in right now and to receive this great award for great citizenship, Kyle, you're an honor to the Fall River Public Schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Mr. Neves for the student delegate report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a few things listed on tonight's agenda that I just wanted to recap, and also thank you everybody for the applause. Respect that a lot. First things first, the biggest project that we've been tackling at Durfee right now is this anti-bullying committee that Dr. Malone had referred to already. And what we're doing is, as students, we're trying to empower the youth across the city, not just Durfee High School, and we're trying to engage in several projects where we can help fight and push for mental health, but also try and prevent bullying within the school system. So one initiative that we've began to take was to create a PSA video where we'd, put a lot of effort, time into this and publish a video that truly encaptures what it's like to be a student suffering from such a difficult situation, and what are ways that we can help and try and prevent things from getting worse and focus on how we can promote mental health. So our committee has been working long and hard. We have a meeting this Wednesday, as Dr. Malone had mentioned, and I really do look forward to empowering other students across the district and hoping that we can really make a push in stopping bullying. Next up, I had mentioned upcoming events at Durfee. So we've been hosting a lot of fundraisers this year, and we just had a pancake tailgate at the Professional Development Day, but we have a school dance coming up soon. We have a Powder Puff football game, which is a fun little event where the boys act as cheerleaders and the girls in the grades play football, so it's like a role reversal. That's a really fun night and can bring in some money for a good cause. Also tying back to the anti-bullying committee, we are currently trying to reach out to Diamond and Conley and other schools across Fall River to partner up and do a color run where all proceeds would go to a foundation working for mental health and donating our money to the fight against bullying, which we think would really make strides in this battle. Next up, Mr. Corey. I just gave him his shirt today, but we have a new order of I Am Fall River shirts, which have just came in, and I have Mr. Hetzler's order. So there they are right there. Mr. Costa's order is there too. So they came in, and hopefully I can get some for all of the members on the school committee and anybody who's willing to get one as well. So what we did for the month of January was all proceeds that we made from those shirts went to the Four Winds fire victims, and we also held a pancake tailgate where we made, I think, $200 or $300 that we put towards the fund to give to Four Winds fire victims. And last week, I went out with my vice president, and we delivered it to Sharon Furtado of the Wives Foundation. It came out to $949 plus over $100 in a bank check. So we're really glad that we were able to help out, and we hope that it goes and helps out these victims in their time of need. And last but not least, project that's going to begin once we come back from February vacation. I've mentioned it a couple of times. It's called Tutors for Toppers, and it's a tutoring program around school where we assign people who are willing to help out other students with students in need to partner up and stay after school or before school or during school hours to help mentor one another and that can range in any subjects, whether it be core-based like mathematics, Spanish, or also stuff like the college application process, which is something we have a lot of students willing to help out with. And we've had a great turnout and people signed up so far. We have about 30 students who have signed up to get tutored, and we have about 20 tutors so far. So I'll keep providing updates once we get that going, but there's a lot of stuff cooking up at Durfee right now, and we really hope that we can change the community for the best. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Next, we have the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made, seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
And Mayor Correa.
Yes. We have a number of travel requests for approval. Is there a motion to approve travel request? Motion,
Second.
seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa.
Yes. We have a number of donations to accept this evening. Is there a motion to accept donations?
So moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa.
Yes. Can you please read the donations?
So, first donation is from Ernie Bach, Music Drivers Foundation to Durfee High School in the amount of $10,000. The next is from EduCause to RPA for $4,400. Then we have a donation from Verizon and variety of patrons to the Sylvia Elementary School for $796. Then we have Scholarship America Target Grant donated to the Henry Lord Community School in the amount of $700. Then we have a donation from Melissa Panchley to Durfee High School in the amount of $502.95. We have a donation from Shaw's Supermarket, also to Durfee High School Athletics, for $500. We also have a donation from Fidelity Charitable Trust to Henry Lord Community School for $325. We also have a donation from Donors Choose to Morton Middle School for $300.25. And we thank all of the donations to help improve efforts in our school system.
Thank you. We have a number of contracts.
Motion to approve all
Motion
contracts.
to approve separation of some contracts. Mr. Martins, which ones?
On the network, Achievement Network, which on that first sheet is number 2, and the Turnaround Assistance Grant, I guess, and it's number 3.
Okay, thank you.
Number one.
Number 1, you want to take them all separately?
Number one, please.
Looks like it's heading that way. Okay, we'll take them all separately then. Okay, so we'll start with the first one, the Emerald Bus Company contract. Mr. Aguirre, you have a question on that one?
We just get further explanation of what this is for.
The Atlantis Charter School has a student who requires a door-to-door service. The door-to-door service doesn't fit in with any of our transportation that we're currently providing at any of our schools, so we needed to add a bus.
And this is student, not plural.
Excuse me?
Singly, one student?
One student.
So we're going to pay $31,000 for transporting one student for half the year.
As we do in our district for quite a few.
Where is the budget currently when we look at, it says it's coming out of the transportation line? If we project it out for the year, have we made up the deficit that we started with?
I'm not sure. Budget-wise. I'm going to say that we're on track as of right now, but I'm not sure if the shortfall has been made up.
It continues to be monitored at this time.
So are we on the same page with that? When we first did the original budget for transportation, I believe the city council or the city in general underfunded it by several hundred thousand.
Yes.
So are we making, when you say we're on target, are we making that up yet? Because the year's gone, or are we still going to be a couple $100,000 in the hole?
At this point, I don't have an exact dollar amount, but I'll continue to monitor it, and I'll report back to you going forward.
Okay, yeah, I think that's just important if it is, so that we notify them ahead of time, so they're not surprised as well. But Mr. Pacheco, back to the other, we have our own couriers. You're saying nobody can pick this child up?
So the courier routes are all tied up. We're providing, the courier's day now is better than 50% transportation, which is an uptick from last year. We've added a couple of things to the courier's routes, so we don't have the capacity with the 3 couriers we have right now to add anything to it.
Are they all working, do we have 3 buses or 4? 3 courier vans?
We have 3 courier vans and 3 couriers are working. We have 4 vans, that's 1 spare.
Yeah. So, I know you might not be prepared for this question, but I recall back last fiscal year when we added an extra position, I recall making that recommendation to the administration that any new people get a 7D license that work in the office so that they could transport people. Did that happen?
It did not. The person that was hired was a transfer from one of our programs, one of our schools in the office, and that person did not have a 7D.
Right. You can understand my heartache on that now, right? Because that's
We do have other licenses in the district. We do
Yeah.
have painters with licenses. We do have other people in the district with 7Ds.
But if that happened, as we requested, I don't know if it was a formal motion, but I think it was just agreed upon by everyone. That's almost a whole salary of a person to bring somebody to and from. And to me, I think that would be a better use of the money, but that's just my opinion. And if we can get that report from Mr. Almeida just to see where we're at, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pacheco, then.
Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. Corey. Mr.
Along
Corey.
with that special license,
Yeah, you're
That's
next.
okay. I'll yield to my colleague, Mr. Corey.
Mr. Corey, go ahead.
So, Mr. Pacheco, along with that extra license, I was questioning that line as well. I'm seeing, this amount of money spent on one student. Could we have our own van? Could we purchase our own van for these cases as we move into the future, so that we could transport
So
these children?
as Mr. Aguirre said,
Not the courier van, though, a special van for transportation alone.
well, the courier vans are all buses. They're all vans, 7D vans that we use for transportation.
All right.
So they do their own routes. Some of the more difficult routes that would be expensive for us to do, the courier vans do that now. And we could always add courier vans, but we're also adding that expense, 50% onto the district, that we absorb that cost, and half of that cost is, it may be 60-40, I'm not quite positive, but half of the cost is borne by the district, half is borne by the city.
So could there be an analysis as to having our own
Sure.
transportation for cases like this, as opposed to farming it out?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
I'll be quick, because Mr. Aguirre and Mr. Corey both touched on points that I was going to make, but, so this is one child, and we're talking, what size bus?
It's a 7D, it's a van.
Just a van.
Yes.
And so we have 3 couriers, 4 vans?
We have 3 couriers, 4 vans. The spare van is actually a spare. It's the oldest van in the fleet, so it is not a frontline piece.
So what would be the cost associated with licensing someone as a 7D driver and having them do this transportation as opposed to spending $31,000 to a bus company to do it?
I don't think it's the cost of the licensing. I think the van itself, I don't think it's an everyday vehicle. So we would need to invest in another vehicle. It's okay to fill in a day here, a day there, but if it's going to be a regular route, then we need to invest in another vehicle.
And that would cost?
I'm not quite sure on the cost. I'm going to guess in the 40s, in the $40,000 range.
And was this amount budgeted in the FY19 budget, or is this an unforeseen, is this a child
This
that
was,
just...
this was, right, this was an unforeseen cost.
So not factored in our FY19 number?
No. It is not unusual, though, Mr. Costa, for this to happen with our students also, that it comes up that a student can no longer ride on a regular transportation with other special needs students, and there needs to be a door-to-door service provided.
Is it anticipated this is going to be a reoccurring transportation need for next year and year after?
It could be, unless, as our transportation needs and also our ability to tiering we could take that into consideration now. Now that we have that student in the mix, now that student can be put into possibly another door-to-door route. We have full-size buses that do door-to-door routes. We just couldn't make it work for time-wise.
Was this the best quote for transportation?
Yes.
So 70 as opposed to a cab, a local city cab vendor to do the...
Yes,
This was-
it is the better route. The cab, the issue with the cab piece is that obviously we're not sure who we're getting on a regular basis every day. It's not always the same driver, and there are other issues with that kind of service.
I mean, my preference would be to make the investment in our district for another van and license someone within our district to do this so that in years to come, as Mr. Corey's pointed out, when we have situations where we get ourselves caught in a bind, we're not giving $31,000 to a transportation company. We have the capacity within our own district to do it.
Sure.
And if the van is $40,000, it would be a slight investment above what we're already making, but the reality is that van now, we could maybe take the older vehicle out of that fleet if it's not an everyday vehicle. And now we've done a couple of things. We've given ourselves a new vehicle in the fleet. We've also addressed the transportation need that we have.
Sure.
That sounds like it may be reoccurring in years to come. So I'm not going to support it tonight, not because I don't think the child needs transportation, but I think, there may be some room for us putting our heads together and coming up with a plan that could save this money and reinvest it, and still get away with what we need to in terms of getting this child to and from school on a daily basis. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
I just want, for the committee's purposes, one of the things that we've been discussing is the investment in more vans as we think about chronic absenteeism and work that we can do on days that it's inclement weather, to get out and drive around and find kids and pick them up and bring them to school. We're having success with the pilot that we're doing with the pediatric doctors in the south end to get those kids to school. So this is something that I'm hopeful that you'll hear more from us about as we move forward and think about recommendations to this august committee regarding the purchase of more vans for us.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hexler?
Yes, thank you. With more vans, we're obviously going to need more employees. We're going to need drivers too. So I don't want to say, well, let's just get some vans, because I don't necessarily want to take somebody from maintenance and then put them in the van. Now, our buildings aren't being maintained. So if we're going to consider getting vans, I think we need to consider hiring some drivers as well.
We would.
All right, with that, I yield. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this contract? Mr. Aguirre?
Just one brief question. Is this already happening?
This van here?
Yeah, so
This van started, yes.
So, as far as being a member of this committee, if I vote no on it, and we all vote no on it, it's still happening anyway.
Then I have to figure another way of getting that student there. We haven't signed a contract, obviously the contract's before you, so we're doing it as a per diem rate right now, and if it doesn't get signed, we'll have to figure out how we're gonna make that transportation work.
Okay, thank you. You want to say something?
Is there a motion to approve?
Superintendent wanted to respond. I was just...
A question?
We can't get into the reasons about why this child requires a van, but you can obviously figure out is something legal, and that's why we have to provide transportation.
Mr. Martins?
I don't know what the requirement is for the needs of this special ed student. However, the student has a special need. It has to be administered to in their other than the student going to school, the student is living at home during non-school days, and I'm sure the student has or is transported to wherever the student has to go or the event that the student, the family participates in. Is it possible to have contact with the parents to say, look, we will pay you to take the student to school. We will pay you mileage, and we'll pay you a certain amount of salary for doing this task. And has that been explored?
It has, Mr. Martins. We have quite a few parents who transport,
know that.
and we pay their mileage already. This particular person does not have the means to transport.
Yuck.
We've already asked, though.
All right.
Absolutely.
I yield, thank you. I move the question.
Move the question, okay, is there a motion to, well, are there any motions? Motion to approve, motion to approve has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, next is the Achievement Network contract. Mr. Martins?
I'm not opposed to the contract in and of itself. But this money, it's to help students. We have what we have as far as the students that are attending Fall River Public Schools. You can say, well, kids are leaving us and we're getting other kids that need to be educated. But bottom line is you have to educate them. When you look at the student report cards, which I have spent quite a bit of time reviewing them, it tells me that while all of these grants, both number 2, item 2 on the summary and number 3 on the summary, number 2 is $15,000. The same comments are for number 3 of $29,570. When you have these types of grants, yeah, it gives you the warm and fuzzy feeling of we're helping students. Yeah, you are helping students to a degree, but nevertheless, where is the money best utilized? It certainly leaves me with the impression, the understanding that we're not spending this money directly into the classroom so that more individual student instruction can take place. We're lacking in the assistance that the classroom teacher needs, especially in the elementary schools, mostly in the elementary schools, as a feeder to the middle schools and then into the high school. Excuse me. I look at these grants and I say, yep, okay. When you look at the data, you have all of this so-called professional development going on, which is fine. I agree with it. And I also agree with the fact that the teachers are working extremely hard to try and get to all of the students that they have. But unfortunately, the scores or the report card is what it is. And the rate of improvement between 17 and 18, 2017, 2018. In some schools, it's okay. Great majority of schools, however, not okay. It's rather stagnant. So now, when you look at the data, and you look at the money, and it's, well, okay, 19 is just around the corner. Well, we are in 2019, and the MCAS testing is going to be in another couple of months. What's it going to be? You still haven't gotten into preparing or funding what is needed in the classroom in order to have the assistance of having more individual student contact. It's nice to have a teacher in the front of the room with all kinds of degrees and credits and whatnot. That's beautiful. However, if that person working like crazy can't get to Johnny Jones, who's in the 5th row, first seat, Johnny Jones isn't going to learn. I really feel that, I don't know if you say, well, this is part of the turnaround assistance grant, and it's carved in stone, we can't do anything about it. Well, I would like to see this committee request the superintendent to contact the Department of Education and have a heart-to-heart talk and say, hey, listen, we're not getting to all the students that we need to get to. So now what? You're going to continue spending the money over here, or can we not use some of that to hire additional paraprofessionals and train those paraprofessionals with professional development funds to be able to be of greater assistance to the teacher, and then have more individual student attention. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coogan?
Okay. I'm not quite sure where that was going or if it did get anywhere, but what's going on in the classrooms in the city of Fall River right now is absolutely breathtaking. If you get out and about and visit the rooms and see the diversified instruction, see the attention given to almost every kid in the room in one form or another in every class, you will see a constant grinding work ethic of the teachers in this district. Mr. Martins, you know, when he says things like so-called professional development, that's a backhanded compliment that in some way, shape, or form he thinks that's not efficient or that's not doing what it's supposed to do. Well, again, I think that if you look at what goes on with professional development today in the schools in the Commonwealth, not just in Fall River, or what goes on in the classrooms, you're going to see a radical change from what went on 20, 15, 10 years ago. And I don't think that these grants used to improve teaching are a waste of time or go underutilized by the staff in the city of Fall River. I think they're an integral part of improving education in the district, and I'm definitely going to support them.
Thank you. You yield. Mr. Aguirre?
Just briefly, I'm pretty sure we've gone over this before, that this is not discretionary money. So the turnaround plan requires that we spend this kind of money. So it's not discretionary. So I think if we added that language when we get the documents to us to say that this is money that's part of, I know it says it's part of the grant, but we shouldn't debate non-discretionary money. It is what it is. This is what it's going to be. So with that, I'd like to move the question and let's get to the vote.
Second.
You know, I'd like to respond to Mr. Coogan.
Mr. Martins? Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I was just acknowledging you.
Okay.
We move the question, point of order?
Yeah.
I move the question, it was seconded.
I'm
We're
going
going to just get to the vote.
to allow Mr. Martins to respond to Mr. Coogan because he did have his hand up before I called you, Mr. Aguirre. Mr. Martins.
All right. Yeah. I agree with the work ethic of the faculty. No problem. However, if what you say is gospel, then by all means, why isn't the student learning increasing? Where do you have, why is from 2008 all the way to 2018, 10 years, that it's relatively flat? And the latest ones that are in the report class report card, school report card, it's the same thing. How long are you going to sit there saying that we don't need anything else? We need to have, just let the things go the way they are, and we're going to achieve. We haven't done so. The data says it. We haven't done so since 2008, and you're sitting there saying that we're going to achieve? We got to do better than that.
You yield, Mr. Martins?
Yes, I yield.
Okay. I think it's, I don't know, the two bookends, no one blows at each other here. I think the point is we're making progress. I think that's what Mr. Coogan is saying. I don't think he's saying that we've concluded. I don't want to speak for him.
No.
But I understand your point as well, Mr. Martins. We are going to move the question. at this time, and if there's a motion to approve this contract, we'll move forward. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Was there still a question on item number 3, Teachers
Same thing.
21? Same thing? Okay. Is there a motion to approve all remaining
So moved.
contracts? All remaining contracts?
Number 3.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Just number 3, please. If we can keep them separate.
Teachers 21, is that the one you're talking about?
Number 3.
Okay. So motion has been made to approve all the contracts at this time except for Teachers 21?
Sorry, can we just go 3, 4, because I got a question on number 4.
Okay. Okay, motion to approve Teachers 21 contract.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 4, South Coast Hospitals Group contract. Is there a question or motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve has been made.
Second.
Second, roll call.
Question.
Mr. Coogan.
I just want to know how many people are getting services under this contract with Hospital Group. I don't want to know, obviously, any names or anything. I want to know how many people we're talking about for that number.
Good evening. So firstly, the bill for the Employee Assistance Program is a bill that we receive through the city. It's a per-person fee, and it's, I don't know the breakdown actually per person. As far as the people accessing it, it's a confidential service, but we did have Mr. Pelletier come here last year and talk to the group. I can tell you that most recently, we've made heavy use of this group. They were great support during the Fonseca incident recently. They were at the building 3 or 4 days in a row supporting staff, as well as anybody else who follows up afterwards. I can get a report for the committee if you so desire. We did this last year, and we had them come back and report on the number of people they service, but it's confidential, so I don't have any data on the individuals.
Right, we don't want to know any data on the individuals. I just want to know the total number, that's all.
Okay. I can get that information if the committee so wishes.
I'll send it out on a Friday email.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chairman.
I just want to make a brief comment. This is a service that's been in place for a number of years. It went away during some tough budget times. However, I can't state the importance of it. I mean, any good organization makes sure it takes care of its people. And the Employee Assistance Program in those times takes care of our people, whether it be them directly, and I know in some cases, in my workplace, it actually extends to family members. So I'm
This
sure
does
that might do the
as
same
well.
thing here. So we're not just talking whether or not it impacts the employee, but certainly their family as well. So I can't state that enough. I think we ask a lot of our employees. They're in situations sometimes that aren't envious, as the Fonseca situation. When times like that happen, employees need someplace to turn, and to have a confidential opportunity to go and meet with someone through the Employee Assistance Program, I think it's worth every penny, and I think we should continue to support it. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar.
Just briefly, I know last year I had asked a few questions. I personally would like to get a copy, get some backup data since it's before us now. But I recall last year that it runs out at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that pressing, February 11th?
No, it's just an annual contract we renew. We bring it before the committee
And
this
what
time
time
of
does
year.
it renew?
I believe it renews July 1.
Yeah, so we have time, so I don't think it's going to be necessarily taking this out. The other thing I believe is we're spending money here on the next year's budget, and we're getting the budget presented tonight with this information. So if we approve this contract, although there probably will be a little bit of money this year, I think putting this as part of the budget package to say, here's the line item for 32.5 for this program, within the confines of the budget makes sense, in my mind, to hold off on this until we get more data.
Just a point of information for my colleague, this is an FY19 expenditure according to the agenda.
July 1 to July 1. So this is actually just billed in arrears.
So we're paying a bill now from July 1 of last year?
They didn't submit it until, I believe, late January.
We didn't use them,
We didn't use them?
not until this fiscal year. So this is the bill for right now.
And it's February 11th.
This is
So
the bill for
services.
this calendar year.
Yeah, so July 1, 20, 18.
to July 1 of 19, but they just sent the
We're
bill
7
to
months
us in
behind.
January.
Okay, that's fine, but my point is for the new, that's what I thought this was.
Okay.
So I apologize. It's, obviously, we got to pay the bill. The committee voted for it. But before we pay it again, let's get some more info.
I'll gather the particulars
Sure.
about the numbers of people that have accessed the system. I'm not sure how I can exactly follow up on if there's any family members or how that information would come, but I will also get the terms of the contract specifically for
I
you.
can tell you one thing that I didn't agree with that was said last year. It was said from that podium by the gentleman that they will offer continual mental health counseling to anybody that goes before them and their families forever, was what was the exact quote last year. And I quite frankly don't believe that. So if we can get that answer, that would be great as well. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say this is a great program. It benefits every employee of the Fall River Public School System. I believe it would probably extend even to us up here as members of the school committee, but I could be wrong. I don't understand the hesitation. I think this is it's a no-brainer. Like, it's for everybody, and it's mental health, it's substance abuse, it's whatever you might be having trouble with, family counseling. It's an excellent program for everyone, and definitely going to approve it. With that, I yield.
Thank you. There was already a motion on the table, and it was seconded. Roll call, please, for approval.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. If there are no remaining questions on the remaining two contracts, we can combine them and approve both, or if there are questions, we can take them separately.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve both
Second.
contracts. There's a second. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, item number 1 for discussion is vote to approve the selection and appointment of Renee Costa, nurse for the Fall River Public Schools. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second with a question,
Motion
Mr.
has been
Chair?
made, seconded.
With a question?
Mr. Costa.
If I can just ask Ms. Long, I thought I saw her. Here she is. If I may ask through the chair, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi.
I noticed the candidate you put forth tonight in the background information you provided to us said the candidate is not licensed, but will be completing all requirements in March of 2019.
Yes,
Are
yes,
you asking this committee to approve this contingent upon her certification?
correct.
So in the event, and I hate to see that happen, but in the event if it were to fall through in March, should we bring back another candidate?
I will.
Thank you, I yield.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Aguirre?
Along those same lines, the other 4 candidates said not eligible. Does that mean not eligible for a waiver?
There was one other one that was certified. However, we set up an interview, and then she returned a call and canceled the interview and decided to pull her application. The other ones, they did not meet any requirements. They couldn't meet the requirements because they didn't have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, and I know the last time we spoke here at the podium, we talked about the not having candidates. It's very difficult to get the certifications, and I would say the same thing. I hope that in the future, we look at that so there's more of a pool. I'm sure this young lady's very nice, going to do a great job based on your recommendation, but we need more people. Like, if you lose 2 or 3, what if we had no other candidates? Now what?
Well, this particular candidate's been subbing for us since September, and she is excellent. And most nurses, you're not going to get them certified when they apply. I've had some people apply that I've gotten subs from the candidates because they don't need the DESE certification. And some of them that have liked what they're doing, we're working towards getting them certified now. So I'm hoping with some of the retirements that are coming up, we'll have some good candidates in August.
Yeah, no, I trust what you're doing. I think you do a great job. Just when I saw that there was only one, the same thing with a teaching job. If it's
Yeah.
only one person certified, very difficult. But keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan? Yes. Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Just made a mistake. The last section was grants. I took the grant also with the last contract, so I'm just going to ask a motion to approve the grant.
So moved.
Motion has been made to approve the grant. Seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 2 is a presentation. This presentation is on bullying.
I'd like to bring forward Dr. Doggin for discussion on where we are, what we're doing.
Good evening. I've been asked to speak to you a little bit tonight on anti-bullying in the Fall River Public Schools. Bullying is an aggressive behavior that is intentional, that involves an imbalance of power or strength. Typically, it is repeated over time. A child who is being bullied has a hard time defending him or herself. And we know bullying can take on many forms, such as hitting or punching, which is physical bullying, teasing or name-calling, which is verbal bullying, intimidation through gestures or social exclusion, which is nonverbal bullying or emotional bullying, and sending insulting messages through email, which is cyberbullying. As leaders and educators in Fall River Public Schools, we are committed to providing an educational climate that is conducive to student engagement and learning. Such, our roles and responsibilities as educators will continue to include providing curriculum and programming that allows students the opportunity to develop social and behavioral skills appropriate to a school environment. And when a student disrupts the educational environment for others, we'll employ a wide range of interventions appropriate to the nature of the conduct and the age of the student. There is no place for harassment and bullying within the Fall River Public Schools. I'd like to take just a few moments to talk about some of the things we do in our district. One, we have a bullying plan that's required by law, and it's posted on our website. 2, we have a bullying coordinator designated in the district. 3, we have a bullying committee in the district. 4, as required by law, all staff participate in annual mandatory training. And you have a copy of 3 of the slides in your packet that we use in that training. We also have forms that are used across the district to report bullying. Those are also in your packet. Administrators are required to have all allegations of bullying investigated. Bullying investigations are documented in our student management system. And if, as a result of the bullying investigation, there is a finding of bullying, parents and guardians are notified, and you have a sample of those letters in your packet. A safety plan is often developed as a result, and you have a real copy of a safety plan in your packet. Our schools have provided our students with curricula and presentations to combat bullying. Some of those examples are also included in your packet. We also have a newly developed task force across the city, folks from Diamond and the Atlantis Charter School, as well as several social service agencies are working alongside us. We also are working with Kyle and the student government to highlight Anti-Bullying Day and Youth Violence Prevention Week. We'll continue to keep you updated on our anti-bullying initiatives as we progress through the school year. That's my presentation this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see the administration put this on the agenda tonight. This is obviously an issue that affects not just us here in Fall River Public Schools, but I would venture to guess probably most schools across the country. And so I want to be clear when it comes to the comment that you made, Dr. Doggin, about it not being tolerated. In fact, I would say that Fall River was probably one of the leading districts when it came to establishing a bullying plan long before it was required by the state. This district, I think the law changed in 2010.
Correct, May of 2010.
this school committee at the time and this district had already implemented its own bullying plan before it was a requirement by the state. So we're well aware of the harmful effects of bullying in our district. I think sometimes it's an issue of educating parents and guardians about what the legal definition of bullying is, because sometimes behavior that occurs between two children may not be okay. It may be rude behavior, it may be insulting behavior, but I don't know that it always rises to the level of bullying. Not to dismiss that as not having a harmful effect on a child, but I think bringing parents in and explaining to them what it means to have the legal definition met of what bullying is a part of this, and I think it should be an ongoing process. It shouldn't just be when a parent gets upset when their child comes home and tells them that they're not getting along with students in their class. The other thing that I'd like to see come from this, and I don't think it's happened, and it's probably long overdue, I'd like to see, and if it needs a motion, I certainly feel free to make one tonight, but I'd like to see this committee on a quarterly basis receive the data from the district with respect to the number of reports that are filed, how many of them are investigated, and what the outcomes are. I'm not interested in the students who are involved. I'm more interested in the statistical value in that, and how often is that occurring, which schools are we seeing it happen in most, what interventions do we have in those schools, because maybe there's an area that we need to infuse more services if we're seeing an uptick in a particular school or schools. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to be supportive of that. I certainly would make it in a form of a motion tonight that on a quarterly basis, the district receive, the school committee receive the statistical data regarding the number of reports, the outcomes, and how many have been investigated.
Sure. I actually have some of that data here before me this evening. In 2015-16, according to what's been reported in our student information system, there were 144, and we have this for all of you, 144 cases reported with respect to completed bullying investigations. In 16-17, there were 212. In 17-18, there was 145, and this current school year, there are 54 to date. So I think that my colleagues have done an awful lot to really address bullying.
And if I may, those are the reported cases?
Correct.
Of those, do we have the number of reports that were substantiated?
I'm sure we can get that.
I think that's of equal importance. When we talk about the number of reports, how many of those do we actually investigate and find that it does rise to the standard of bullying? So I'm going to make that in the form of a motion, Mr. Chairman, just because I'd like to codify that for the record, that the committee is going to ask the administration to provide on a quarterly basis the number of reports, how many have been investigated of those reports, and how many have been substantiated. I'm going to ask that going forward. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman.
You're making that in the form of a motion now?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Corey?
Thank you, Dr. Doggin, for that presentation. Since last month, we've been on a real PR campaign to discuss bullying publicly. We had a roundtable discussion a couple of weeks back, and I know that that work will continue, but I do know that the work on bullying has been ongoing in each of our schools each year. And as a retired counselor, I can attest to that. I used to have to complete training each year, and I went up to Bridgewater at the Mass Aggression Reduction Center at MARC several times. And we're very fortunate to have that center right in our backyard because they're a major consultancy for us as a school district. And I know that we're approaching this enigma on bullying face-on. It goes hand in hand with the age group of young students that engage in that type of activity, and the ongoing work of not only the programming that we're trying to run in our schools, but the heavy caseload for our school counselors working it each and every day, and the classroom teachers who have to deal with it as well. So I want to praise our staff for working with this head-on. It's going to continue to be an ongoing issue. And as I have the bully pulpit here, I would like to make a plea to the parents out there, all parents in our city, to work with their children and to monitor their children, especially with their control of this device right here, because it can be very divisive for a child when they use cell phones and social media in the wrong way. So I applaud the efforts that we're trying to use to combat this problem. At the same time, I know it's going to be ongoing, and I make a plea to the parents to work with their children so that they could regulate the use of this social media device when it's in the hands of their children. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Mr. Martins.
Yes, I'd like to make reference to the last part of Dr. Baker's report, the letter from the Sylvia Elementary School. I think that process is well thought out. I think the issue hopefully is resolved, but it was an excellent way, and I greatly appreciate that letter. I've read it several times.
That's the safety plan and monitoring plan, and actually below it would be pictures of the children so that those who are perhaps not as familiar at recess or in the cafeteria would also be privy to this safety monitoring plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Student Delegate, Mr. Neves.
I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask this question to, but I just wanted to clarify something. So the report that we were given, it's labeled as completed bullying investigations. So I believe Mr. Costa had asked for just total, but my question is, like, what determines whether or not they're investigated or completed? And, like, is there a certain level that you have to reach of, like, extreme bullying that determines whether or not you look into it, or are all forms and reported bullying examples looked into?
All forms of bullying are investigated. However, remember, bullying is an imbalance of power, and at times it may just be conflict. So through the course of the investigation, a determination is being made whether it indeed is defined as bullying, as meeting the legal definition. And if the building administrator determines that indeed it is bullying, then these such documents, which I agree with you, are very well done, well documented. They're shared with the families as well as the safety plan put in place. But all cases are investigated and all cases are documented. It may not be just designated as bullying.
So in the case that a report isn't identified as bullying and not looked into as the numbers that were given here, so what happens to the students who were placing reports? Are they just left alone, or is there monitoring in process?
Monitoring in process, and in our student management system, there's a section called journal, and that's where a lot of the information is stored, so that if indeed over a period of time conflict turns into bullying, we've got a running record of that.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre.
Just a few quick comments. As looking at the letter from the school to the parents, it sort of struck me a little bit that for the type of event that was described, at the end it says the child will receive 3 detentions. Is that in the handbook that's what you get?
I'm not sure.
Could you get us some sort of
correlation
sure. Between what was here?
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's very little, quite frankly. The other thing is, when you look at these reports and the data and the things that we have to deal with in schools, I've been a proponent of a lot of school adjustment counselors, more than we need than ever before. I've also advocated for when people say that the district has too many vice principals and administrators in the schools. When I look at reports like this, And having worked and working in the field now, I understand the hours that it takes to do a full, complete investigation. So the only reason why I mentioned that, and we're not seeing the budget till later, I haven't even looked in there, but when we hear from a lot of people, there's too many vice principals, there's too many administrators, there's too many counselors because they're in the admin union, absolutely not, because you don't do these kind of reports. And this is only the ones that get done. You have to study them, you have to look at them to try and make sure all the kids are taken care of, that we need more of those people. So I just want to use this as a point of reference when we go through the budget. And if you could get us that info, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Coogan.
I'm going to talk to my colleague down the end, Kyle, after the meeting, because he stole a lot of what I was going to say, and I'll talk to you about that after the meeting, Kyle. My contention is that, as Mr. Aguirre also said, these were the documented cases that were completed that are next to, correct?
That's one incident, what you have in front of you.
Right.
Yes.
So when we go back to 15, 16, there were 144 one incidents in that year. So this year, it looks like we've had a significant drop. And everybody is still following the same procedures with the coding and the paperwork that we referred to.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Item number 3 is a presentation and discussion of the FY19 health insurance presented by the CFO of the city, Mary Sahadi. So I'll bring her up. I know there's a lot of questions going back and forth by the committee, so Superintendent Malone and I discussed this and said it would be best to bring this to everyone's attention and talk about where we're at and some of the complexity around health insurance. And Mary's going to get into the details, but as I think all the committee members know through the email chain, that what's going on with the health insurance, that we're going to probably not use all of the budgeted amount. So we're going to be committing tonight to transferring $1 million from the city side to the school department to hopefully shorten that gap, make that gap a little bit smaller, and then we'll continue to watch it and maintain it. But we want to get that money to you now, so that you have plenty of time to spend that instead of in, for example, the last month or even after the budget process is done for 2020, and then you have to use that money in a very short period of time. So talking to a few of the members, we felt that was best, and talking to the financial teams, we thought that was best, so we'll be doing that. But to talk about the details and answer any of your questions, I'll turn it over to Ms. Sahadi. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we spoke the last time, health insurance is one of those areas that certainly is fluid in the sense that it changes from month to month. So when I was here last, we had through November in terms of health claims, and as of right now, we are actually through January. So as Mayor Correa just indicated, the projections, if we will, looking at the spring going forward, would look like we are going to have a surplus, or the school department is going to have a surplus in their health care. So the question becomes, is the surplus $1 million, as the mayor just indicated, or is the surplus up to potentially $1.5 million, or maybe $1.6 million? We did do some additional analyses since the last time I was here, and I spoke to the superintendent with regard to it, that really shows that the spring claims for the school department are always higher than the fall claims. So people tend to be sicker in the wintertime than they are in the summertime. So we tried to take that into consideration when we looked at where we were. So at this particular point, being here early February, it would appear that it would be fair to transfer $1 million out of the health care expense line and move it back into the school operations. And so we will be presenting a transfer request that has to go to the city council. That is a transfer that they have to move from one appropriation account to another for their next meeting. So next Thursday, we will submit it, and the meeting will be the following Tuesday. At this particular point, we look at all health claims. So we're not looking at just Blue Cross, so we're looking at the dental accounts, we are looking at the prescription drugs. So another area, when the prescription drugs were carved out in fiscal 19, the first year that they've been actually carved out, we can definitely see a savings as well. So although the Blue Cross administrators have increased their fees as a result of theoretically more accounting that they have to do, the overall carving out of the prescription drugs now utilizing the company called Maxor, has also provided a savings. And as Committeeman Aguirre pointed out at the last meeting, from 2018 to 2019, you've actually had a drop in your membership as well. So you take into consider all of those components of calculating your healthcare expense, and there definitely does seem to be that there'll be a savings during this fiscal year, and we are comfortable. Mr. Almeida and myself have looked at these numbers every which way, and we're comfortable at this point that there will be a savings in fiscal 19. And as the mayor just pointed out, it makes good sense to provide that transfer to the school department today or the next city council meeting, as opposed to waiting until, next September when we really do the final accounting. Because remember, we're on the incurred but not reported, so the bills are really 2 months in the rears when they're being paid. So your last June 30, or you're at June 30, we are still paying the April bills. So July we pay May, and August we pay June. So it's really not until mid-September or late September that we really have a full accounting of what the healthcare costs were for a given year. Any questions?
Mr. Coogan?
Using that same method, when would you anticipate, if the numbers played on the high end, that we get the other money back?
Probably not until the end of the year. We would, if it continues on that the surplus is going to be significant, and, how do we define significant, right? Significant is different to everyone. But I would suggest to the administration, since, as you know, I represent the city here, I would suggest to the administration that if we're still seeing a trend of a positive surplus, then we may turn back or suggest to the city council that another transfer be made in the May or the June timeframe, depending on what the amount is. If it's, again, significant, we'd probably want to do it sooner than later. But if it seems to be hovering around that $1 million that we transfer now, then we would wait until the close of the healthcare accounts.
Okay. And I just have one further question. I want to compliment my colleague on the right here, Mr. Aguirre, because he educates me on some of these issues like this, and he knows a lot about healthcare, and he was pointing out to me the drop in the number of members that were using the healthcare system and how that would have a significant, quick, tangible change. And again, I want to thank him for his work on that. I appreciate it. He's educating me in the lovely world of healthcare. And thank you, Mary. I know you're on top of it also.
You're welcome.
I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, thank you for giving us an update. My question coming here tonight was, where is the money that's been budgeted for the school department's health care? And if we are trending and seeing less being expended on claims, why not look to make that transfer now rather than waiting? Mm-hmm. And so that seems to be happening tonight, and I'm appreciative of that, because I think that's the first time that I know of where, when it came to health care, the city side has actually provided that funding to the schools in that same fiscal year. Typically, we have to wait till the close of school, our numbers are certified, and then sometime next fall, winter of the following fiscal year, we'll get that one-time money. So getting it now certainly give us an opportunity to take care of some of the expenses we have in this year's budget. I will agree with you on the claims tend to spike in the spring, heading down the stretch. I don't know if people in the school department tend to do more of the elective type procedures, medically, knees, those types of things, as the summer approaches, so they're not out of school for an entire year. I'm not sure, but I know that historically has been the case. Our claims tend to spike heading down the stretch.
When I did that analysis, that's exactly what I found.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've talked to Mr. Almeida about that a number of years as the budget has gone on. We tend to see that influx. I still have a concern. The $1 million is certainly going to go a long way in the city's contribution towards its requirement for net school spending. Mm-hmm. But we're all in on this healthcare number and meeting 100%. Matter of fact, I think we're just north of 100% if we expend everything that was projected in healthcare. So I think it's important for us to continue to monitor this as the fiscal year unfolds, because if we continue to see the same thing happen and we're not paying those claims because they're just not materializing, we're going to fall below our obligation for net school spending for this fiscal year. So I think this $1 million is going to go a long way towards the city's contribution to keep us close, but I just want to caution everybody that if we head down the stretch and these claims don't come to fruition, we're all in on that healthcare number for meeting our obligation for net school spending. So I just want to, if it looks like that's going to be the case, then I'm hoping the city will be in a situation before we get to the end of this fiscal year to maybe talk, at least have the conversation about what may be available. And I understand that the city, at least by the last projected numbers, financially seems to be in a good position. So if that's the case, I know from where I sit and members of the committee sit, it's always beneficial to take that money and use it sooner rather than later, because then we're up against trying to use one-time money for expenses, and sometimes that's disruptive. So thank you for the presentation tonight. I appreciate it. I look forward to continuing to work with Ms. Almeida and your team to make sure that we do get all the dollars that have been committed to education as timely as we can. With that, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Martins.
Good evening. Tell me something, please. If healthcare is part of the school department budget, that's also part of net school spending.
That's correct.
Okay. If the city pays for health care, that's also part of net school spending.
Correct.
So therefore, whether you're paying total, all the bills, that's net school spending. School department pays the bills, net school spending. You're not adding to it, you're just, with this $1 million, now that you are projected for 1 million savings, is that correct?
From the estimate that was made last May, correct.
Okay. Of which case then, hopefully that comes about, right, in there, and then and you've indicated that that could be transferred to the school department budget.
Correct. That would be my, or the mayor's recommendation to the city council next Tuesday.
Okay. And if that passes, then that $1 million can be used for other things.
Operating expenses within the school department.
Yes.
Correct.
The school budget, I could buy textbooks with it.
Correct.
I could also add paraprofessionals, which I'd really love to have more. Correct? Yeah, I know you're smiling. I agree.
Correct.
Absolutely. Had to get that dig in there. But, nevertheless, the net school spending is going to stay the same, because you're not, the city is paying 1 million, you're not using that one, you budgeted for a certain amount of money for net school spending, which included the health care.
Correct.
Okay. Of which case now you find, okay, but from that net school spending, from that portion of health care, it's projected that we're going to save $1 million. Right? So the Fall River, this side, Fall River side, the city side goes down, actual, by about $1 million. That's transferred to, oops, sorry about that. That's transferred to the school department, and we spend it on other line items of $1 million. Net school spending hasn't changed.
Correct.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make that perfectly clear. Thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question on the grants. I think it was $1.3 million that the city gets from grants.
That's the estimate or the budget. That will vary at the end of the year as well. It's been between 1.2 million and I believe last year was 1.361.
And the reason why that does not get counted towards net school spending is because it's a grant reimbursement?
Well, it's netted into the health insurance, so the health insurance would be $1.3 million higher if that revenue wasn't received from the grants.
And the same would apply to a revolving account?
If there were any revolving accounts, I don't believe there are that are charged health insurance.
But if they ever did charge health insurance, it would not be counted, it would be netted, the same as a grant?
Correct. Like BCTC and community development, those are not necessarily
So we
revolving accounts, but there are other funding mechanisms into the health insurance.
So if we had a revolving account that at some point in the future paid some health care, it would just get netted out?
That's
like
correct.
this. The stop-loss contract, I know we talk about it, we vaguely know what that is. Is it possible in the future to get just a copy of what that contract is to the school committee?
I'm sure I could ask HR for a copy of it.
Yeah,
yes.
that's all, nothing, just to see what it is and what the limits are and all that stuff. I just had a question for Mr. Almeida, or the superintendent. Maybe I can ask the superintendent, and if you need to ask Mr. Almeida, but it's related to the amount of scrutiny to where we're at right now. So as far as the budget goes for the, I hear what Mrs. Sahadi said, I hear what the mayor said, they're going to transfer $1 million over to, based on the claims projections. But I'd like to get the school department folks to tell me what their projections are as of right now.
You see on the bottom of your sheet, it's 44.66%. So if we assume that no one else is sick and those averages stay the same, that's going to equal 89%. So 89% of that total figure there, you're talking about 1.5 million maybe?
Where are you adding? 10% of what? What number are you looking at?
So the
20 million?
The figure on the total there.
Which total?
24 million, so probably closer to 1.8.
So 10% of 24 million is 2.4 million.
Again, that's if no one else gets sick. We haven't gone through that.
No, I get it. I understand that there's things that can happen, but I'm just looking, at the last meeting in December when we both had the discussion, so we've asked the question, where does the city side look at it and where does the school department side look at it? I've been sort of vocal on the school side, wanting to push the school folks, from you or whoever you work under you, to push for getting accurate numbers. Last meeting, we got 1.8 million was Mr. Almeida's number, and Mrs. Sahadi's was 1.4, according to the report. What I'd like to get now is, what is it now 2 months later?
I think Mr. Almeida's is 1.6, and mine is about the same, 1.5, 1.6. You have to remember that those are all estimates based on the claims that we're at today. So that number is going to change every day as you have more claims coming in terms of your payment to Blue Cross or to Maxor, or whether we're receiving any stop-loss insurance, because that comes into play. If we're receiving it because we've had claims over the limit, that would play into it. We get rebates now on the prescription drugs, that would play into it. All of those numbers are fluent, and so they change almost every day as we get more data and or more invoices are received from the vendors. We have federal tax insurance that we have to pay on certain individuals that are not.
Yeah, no, I understand. If Mr. Almeida could give us his opinion.
So at this time, it's between 1.6 and 1.7 million dollars today.
And that, the piece of the claims, I know I've asked this before, when we sit down at the end of the year, how do you differentiate between a school, somebody that works for the school and their claim, and somebody who works for the city and their claim? How does that process work in scrutinizing those numbers?
So the plans are split out. There's, a city-based plan, and there's a school-based plan. And depending on which department or which category you fall into, you're within that plan.
And the claim, so when we say we go by claims, it's actually by each claim for each individual? It's not just a number and then you divide 55%?
No. So we get our actual school-based claims, and the city has their city-based claims. And those claims are split out in the general ledger, so we know which one is which.
So this year, 91 people less on health care in the current year?
At this time, there's 91 people less than we had last year, yes.
So that'll affect later on when all the dust settles? You'd have a lot less claims probably, theoretically.
Assuming not big claims not coming in, yes, that should affect it.
The, when does that process happen between the city side and your office?
Which process
As
is
far
that?
as like going over those claims, is that a report from GBS that, or whatever the new name is, to you? How does that work? Is it a sit-down face-to-face? Is it a haggling over the bills?
That's not typically what happens. We've haggled in the past, but, I get copies of the bills, and I see the bills split out for what's ours and what's theirs. And I see what's posted in the general ledger to know that that's the accurate posting.
All right, so you get reports?
Yes.
Basically. So I'd like to ask that on each monthly report, financial report that's always on the agenda, I'd like to ask that something along the lines of where we're at for healthcare is placed on that, like we did the circuit breaker on the bottom of the thing.
Yep.
Because I don't think we need to have Mrs. Sahadi come back to each meeting, but I think having it as part of our monthly, I personally would like that to be the case so we can monitor it, as Mr. Costa said, a little closer. I think I'm happy that this is working out this way. I'm glad it didn't go, the opposite way. But at the end of the day, it's really only to push for resources for the schools. So in the future, I would like to either be involved in or make recommendations on how, once we pass a budget, like we're going to get this budget tonight, and then we're going to hear it's going to be 101% of net school spending, and there's a number thrown in there. I really don't, the 101% doesn't really matter to me. I'd rather have an honest 100%. And then we can look at the Medicaid reimbursements and those type of things after. But when we look at what's going to happen in March or April or May, and we do a financial analysis by GBS, that should be looked at by both sides, in my opinion, prior to September, October, November, so that we get a hold of this earlier. And I think that scrutinizing the number of employees is important. I think we should know that sort of on a regular basis. So whatever you have that in the future you can throw out there, I'm happy to meet to try and make some suggestions, but it is kind of, we're lucky that we caught this. Otherwise, we'd be just kicking this can down the road till next year, adding it, and then seeing where we're at. So with that being said, I'm happy that we're getting to the point where we are. Keep up the hard scrutiny of this subject, and with that, I yield.
So, yeah, I agree with you. You made a good point. I think the 101 and the discussion about net school spending in this community has been played around with for a long time. I think what we have to start as a committee considering, we don't have to do that tonight, but just to start thinking about it, is the dollar value, the actual new dollars being invested into education year after year. So if you look at the last several years, I think we spent $3 million above FY17, $3 million more in FY18, $3 million more in FY19. In this upcoming budget you'll see tonight, $9 million more spending is being proposed than last year. So that's a pretty significant jump in actual dollars into the school department, and we're very proud of that, and that's to the credit of the financial teams and the school committee and our state aid as well. So I think that you're absolutely right. I'd rather see a 100% honest budget that puts more resources in the classroom than sit here and talk about how much money is going to be spent on health insurance or not, because none of those dollars are going to the classroom. That is a projection that if people get sick, we're going to meet the projection. If people don't get sick, we're not going to meet the projection. So, I'm just breaking it down simply. So I agree with Mr. Aguirre's point, and I think it's something that the committee needs to continue to consider going into FY20 and beyond. So thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Kevin. Questions, comments? Very good. Okay, next is item number 4. It's an update and discussion on the FY20 Fall River Public School Transportation contract process, bid process. So just to set the stage on this, the superintendent and I discussed this as well. I just wanted to make sure that this was on the agenda tonight, give the committee an update. Transportation is very, very important as we go into the budget process, but we have to get this right, and there were some concerns and questions coming from committee members, coming from the city side, vendors, all kinds of people. One of the things that I just want to get out there tonight is just an update of where we're at and just any changes being made to the bid process. I know there were some, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So the first portion of the bid process is over, which was the out-of-district vans and that transportation that was awarded to Tremblay's, and we're just about wrapped up with that section. The second portion is on the street now, out to bid. The due date for those bids are February 28th, and that is for the yellow bus, the sports runs, and the special ed. Those documents As you can see in the packet tonight, we've answered questions whenever asked to all. There's two addendums. One was handed to you tonight, Addendum 3. There will be another addendum, Addendum 4, which is a couple of questions. As soon as they come in, Mr. Labrie handles that and gets those answers to all of the bidders. So everyone has the updated information.
Questions, comments from the committee? Mr. Aguirre?
Just a brief question. I think I might ask this before. Is Mr. Labrie on the contract from the school department?
Yes.
It's a one-shot deal, right? It's not a, no offense, sir, I'm not trying to be rude or anything.
The contract is to, originally was to do the analysis, the second contract to do the bid process, and currently under contract to implement the bid process once it's in place, along with the...
But it's with short money, right?
Yes, it is.
And it's whole, it's not,
It's-
the more
no,
you
it's
keep
not.
coming back with meetings.
Absolutely not. No.
I just keep seeing this gentleman here all the time.
No, it's not
Subcommittee
a-
meetings, and I like seeing you, sir, but...
He's not
some
by the
point-
hour.
yeah.
Absolutely not.
All right, with that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Corey?
So I'm referring to item number 20 in the packet. It says, should the state require existing buses to be retrofitted with seatbelts? The district agrees to negotiate such cost impact with the contractor. Does that mean our costs go up if the state makes a new regulation?
If the state were to require seatbelts in existing school buses, then it would be a local mandate under Proposition 2.5, and the state would have to pay for it. I would think that the city would receive the money for that cost from the state. They did that when they retrofitted school buses for Eagle Eye mirrors years ago.
Thank you very much. I yield.
We're having a sidebar here, sorry. Mr. Martins?
The issue of seatbelts, however, is going to be enforcement. That's going to be a real problem of how are you going to enforce, although it says like 70 passenger bus, you're going to get about 48 of high school kids in it because their butts are a little bit wider than a elementary school kid in there. So that's going to be some additional cost in regards to having a monitor in that bus to say, you have to put your seatbelt on. And the student turns around and says, no, I don't. Now what? You have a discipline problem in there. But I've looked through this several times, and I see that first student had a bunch of questions. At least it's in here.
Correct.
And is there any other bidder submit questions?
Yes. 4 of the 6 who attended the bidders meeting submitted written questions. They're all included in Addendum 1. In addition, several contractors sent in additional questions, which we answered in addition, Addendum 2 and Addendum 3. I just didn't note who they were, other than first student, because they submitted it that way as a document. And then this evening on my way down, I received 3 more questions by email, which we'll be responding to, if not tonight, tomorrow morning, with Addendum 4. As you know, we cannot entertain questions directly from contractors and answer them individually. Under Chapter 30B, we're required to provide the same information to all prospective bidders. So the addendums go out to all prospective bidders. I think there were 16 companies who originally requested specifications. They all get the addendums, even if they did not attend the bidders meeting itself.
I just couldn't, it's clear which questions were asked by first student, but I'm looking at Addendum 2, and like, okay, who asked these questions? I'm looking at Addendum 3, and it's who asked these questions. I don't see that happening here inside of.
No, like I said, I did not note who asked which questions other than first student because they submitted them in writing, and I used exactly what they submitted to respond to.
Okay.
But
I see. So
if you would like to know, we can go back through all the
but,
questions and note who asked which question.
What you're saying is the questions submitted by other bidders are included in the questions submitted by first student.
Some of the questions were redundant. Some of the contractors asked very similar questions, but we answered every question, whether it was in the first student section or the other questions and answers that were answered in all of the addendums.
Thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Hexler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the software. Maybe this question would be more for Mr. Pacheco. How's that going? What's the progress on the software
So we had our
implementation?
kickoff meeting. I want to say it was Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, Thursday or Friday of last week. And it went very well. So we are prepared to move forward and get started on that, on the software, along with the 3 employees in the transportation department. So we will be ready in time for the process of the second bid, just as soon as that happens.
Right, so it'll be implemented in full
Absolutely.
use next year?
Yes, it will.
Excellent.
The software, unfortunately, right now, would not really have a lot of value to us because of the inability to tier, which is one of the big pieces with that software, and with the contractors knowing full well that that software is going to be what we're using, and that's spelled out in the documents. It now becomes something that's not going to be a nice to have, but they have no choice but to use it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Corey?
Mr. Pacheco, I just want to ask your opinion on the revised bid forms and with the alternative 1, alternative 2. Alternative 1 stipulates single contractor, alternative 2 stipulates multiple contractors. In your opinion, what are we looking at here?
So basically, we were, as we didn't get any bids on the first round, where we were only asking for 1 bidder on the whole yellow bus situation, we decided that it would be better to break that up and still allow us to do the tiering as if it was 1 bidder. And that's exactly what we did. So we broke it up into 3 pieces. Each piece controls a certain part of the transportation and allows us to do full tiering across the district so we're not compromising anything by breaking it up that way. We also feel that, and as we've seen in the pre-bid meeting, it's going to allow us to have more competition.
Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Pacheco, are you expecting a savings in transportation?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Do you know how much at this point?
As we predict, looks like we were forecasting in the first portion that was bid already, it's upwards of $500,000, and we're hoping that we at least do that in this section.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Martin's last question.
In your last comments, Mr. Pacheco, with regards to the multiple contract award.
Yes.
Right. Last month when I questioned you, I brought up the issue of zoning.
Right.
And you stated that, we can't do that.
So this is not,
Isn't this?
So it's not zoning. Basically what it is the sports transportation is going out as 1 bid.
Yep.
1 company could bid on the sports transportation or could also bid on 2 other sections, one being the special ed transportation and the other one being the typical transportation yellow bus. So each one of those is separate and can be bid out separate, or they can still be bid out as a whole, but that's district-wide. It's not zone. It's the entire city. All the yellow bus transportation typical, all the yellow bus transportation special ed, and all the yellow bus transportation for sports runs.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Item number 5 is a presentation and discussion of the proposed FY20 budget presented by the superintendent. I believe he needs the screen behind us so we can.
So tonight, we look forward to presenting the FY20 budget. What's interesting with the FY20 budget is that this presentation, I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. Those of you who have been with the committee now for this is their second year, a lot of the information is the same, but it's for the public's good, so we can be fully transparent in how we develop our budget. So this presentation will go on our webpage, and it's, I think, a very good and clear presentation around how a school budget is made and then how educational funding works in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So what is our budget? Our budget is our statement of core values. It drives the strategic plan of the system, and it focuses on the centrality of the classroom. How do we support teaching and learning in schools? It's a living document. It changes. It's governed by the committee, but you have the authority to ensure that we move money around, that we meet our obligations, but that we always strive to make sure that every dollar is a dollar that's wisely invested. The foundation budget in Massachusetts is made up of three things. Local contribution and Chapter 78, which equals what's known as net school spending. Net school spending is the minimum amount required under the law, under the Chapter 70 law, that each community must pay on its education. It's a cost directly related to the education of students, but it also includes the indirect costs. Those are some of what we talked about tonight with insurance. As we know, the goal of Chapter 70 was that for every community in the Commonwealth to have a floor. Now, we also know that over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of talk on the Hill about how we can increase what's seen as a broken formula, the Chapter 70 formula. And the Foundation Budget Review Commission has outlined 4 priorities: health care, special education, low income, and second language learners. It's 4 areas where we need to more heavily weight how much each child shall receive under the Chapter 70 formula. The good news is that in House 1, in the governor's budget, he in fact has made a modest step in the right direction, an increase in those 4 areas. Not full where we want to be, but a first step. And we also know that there are 2 other bills on the Hill, one in the Senate and one in the House, that will look at doing over the Chapter 70 formula. So how is it determined? So the foundation budget determines the adequate level of education expense per grade, per program, by the kinds of students that we have in school systems. But then it looks at the municipal wealth factor for each community in the Commonwealth. So the Department of Revenue determines what that municipal revenue growth factor is for every city and town. It takes that figure and determines how much can the city and town spend on education, and then how much must come from the state. The local contribution and the state aid equals the net school spending requirement. That's what we know here, and we keep using the term 100%. That is the minimum allowable expense under the law, but again, based on the dual effort of the local community and Chapter 70. As we called before, Chapter 70 is state tax dollars that offset the total cost of educating students across the Commonwealth. The last piece of the puzzle, of course, is what we worked so hard on last year, which is our shared cost agreement. And those are the chargebacks or the indirect expenses between the city and the schools, sometimes referred to as Schedule 19 charges. So what is the budget process at the state level? Well, in January, the governor puts out his budget, which is known as House 1. Mid-April, House Ways and Means will work on their budget. They'll present that sometime before May. Then the Senate Ways and Means does the same thing, and they submit their budgets. And then we have 3 budgets: the governor's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget. You take all those proposals, and they go into a joint conference committee, and then through vetoes and overrides, the state votes on a final budget. Hopefully that has to happen before June 30th. Hopefully it happens a lot sooner than that, so we have a better understanding of what our actual numbers are. But let's look at what that budget process looks like here in Fall River. We start our process in November. The school committee, my team works on a set of budget priorities. We share with the school committee. The school committee deliberates deliberates, and then they approve the budget priorities, and then we do our zero-based budget meetings with all of our principals and department heads and org leaders. And then tonight in February, I submit what's known as the superintendent's proposed budget to the school committee. Once I do this, it is then the school committee's budget. And then you are the fiduciary responsibility to finalize a budget and submit it to the mayor. The process after tonight involves very intense finance subcommittee meetings, then public hearing, and then the school committee adopts a budget and submits it to the mayor. What's new this year is that by April 15th, there needs to be a joint city council meeting with the school committee and the city council for the purpose of discussing budget. That's new under the new city charter. And then May 17th, by May 17th, based on what the charter says, submit the budget to the city council for deliberation and approval by 6:30. Again, keeping in line with the end of the fiscal year and the work that happens in the state. So this year in developing our budget, we stuck with what really I think is gotten us in a good place, which is really looking at the strategic investments for the future success and the long-term sustainability of the school system. Our budget, we want the process to be transparent, we want it to be clear, and we want it to be inclusive of all of our learners. Those are really the core values that we walk in thinking about what our new budget is. We used the photo tonight of the brand new Durfee High School is a metaphor, if you will, for the future of what our priorities are moving forward. Excellence, sustaining success, and long-term sustainability. We don't have to read that, but essentially this is our mission, our vision, our core values, and our strategic priorities. We've taken these from the other documents that the school committee's approved. We share them with in the presentation tonight, but I'm not going to read this to you, but you should know it by heart. Fall River at a glance. This is the current student enrollment. We have 10,120 students. This is our current demographics compared to last year's state demographics, because the current state demographics aren't out yet. This is also our select populations. First language on English, we're 25.7%. English language learners, 16.3%. Students with disabilities, 20.2%. High needs, we're at 77%. And economically disadvantaged, we're at 68.9%. You look at those figures compared to the state, you see how our weighting on these specific students is beneficial in the Chapter 70 formula for places like Fall River. Now look at this. This is an interesting demographic snapshot. Look at the wave. You can see the curve in the number of English language learners just in 9 years, from 5.4% to 16.3%. If we think about how fast that population is growing in Fall River. Granted, our team's done a great job of coding. That may be one of the reasons why you're seeing, but we also know that we're getting more and more students that are coming to us from particularly the Caribbean and Central and South America. So the large majority, of course, speak Spanish, but we still have large percentage of Portuguese speaking and from Cambodia. So here's our team. Total FTEs in the system, 1,693. You can see the breakdown between teachers and paraprofessionals, administrators and counselors, government programs, facilities maintenance, nutrition workers, clerical, security, and then folks on individual service contracts like myself, non-union. This photo is the recent Crystal Apple Awards given to some outstanding educators at our February 1st Professional Development Day. So on the left gives you a different version of what that calendar looked like when you do it in non-circular form. And you can see we're sticking with our calendar that you've adopted to make sure that we hit all our dates, our parameters, and then our priorities in terms of budget. What is it that we're trying to do more of? And these are the things that I did my best to ensure that we could build in. I think I did a good job in meeting all of our recommended budget priorities in this year's budget proposal as investments. So here's a Chapter 70 overview. Now, look at the enrollment figure. We're up 166 students. Now, again, well, why does it say 11,987 when I already just told you we only had 10,120? This includes all the charter school students as well, because remember, those costs are part of our Chapter 70 expenses. So the good news, though, is we have 166 more students in our foundation. That is good news, and I'll tell you why it's good news. Huh? I can't figure that out yet, but I will. But essentially, one of the things that shows, though, is that each of those schools, though, is still growing because of their grade configuration, so they're getting bigger, but we're also getting bigger. If you think about how many kids we had here in the school system at this time last year and what we have right now, I believe we're up, I think it's 10 students, I'm talking about by the month, which is good because we were worried, and I'm still worried, our kindergarten numbers are low. I hope that trend doesn't continue because we want to stay around 10,120 students moving forward because we know we'll be able to sustain growth if we can do that. So here's the good news, ladies and gentlemen. Our foundation budget has grown by $9.7 million. And that takes into effect the growth in the district and the increased weighting of our special populations. That also includes, Mr. Martins, growth in vocational students. Yay! You owe me a pizza. All right. So the required district contribution here is grown $1.4 million. That means the city's contribution locally is going to increase by $1.4 million, and the increase in Chapter 78 is $8.2 million to get us to 100% of net school spending. Here's a real interesting figure. If you look at the bottom, the state pays 80.42% of the overall budget. Now, so that has grown over the last several years, and I think that's because of, again, the special populations of students that we serve. The state's been trying to get us to a target share of 76.66%, but as you can see, we're actually higher than what the target is, and for us, that's a good thing. Because that means that the state still has to give us more money in Chapter 70 because of the weighting. So here's the House 1 revenue overview. Chapter 70 state aid, $127,930,660, which is an increase over final FY19 Chapter 78 of about $8.2 million. In that figure, each kid went up at least $20. Now, we know that's not enough, but again, because House students are weighted, we received about a 6.7% increase overall. Thank you. Tell me what to do. I like to stand in front here. Thank you. I'm going to stand right here. All right. So the city contribution increases by $1.4 million, which we talked about. The appropriation, a total at 100% is $159 million. That's our 100% net school spending figure. If you look at the trends over the last 5 years, our foundation budget, you can see, has gone up. Required district contribution has gone up not as fast as the foundation budget or the Chapter 70 aid. Shows you, again, the special populations in the weighting. So the FY19 operational budget was $149 million. The FY20 net school spending, House 1, at 100% is $159 million. The budget I'm proposing tonight is $160.62 million, which represents a delta above 100% of $1.59 million. That's 101% net school spending. The strategy that we used to get to this figure was based on what the needs that we've identified through our zero-based budget process, the student needs that are driving every single program improvement that we're working to address, the cost containments and repurpose allocations, which I'll go into in a second, and then our human capital conversions and our reductions in certain areas to be able to contain costs. 101% of net school spending is the figure that I'm proposing. Tonight's budget that I'm proposing is $160.662 million. You can see the major line items categories to percent changes in salary benefits, which include step increases and lane increases, contractual services, materials and supplies, and insurance. Here are the budget highlights, which I'm very proud of, and I want to thank my team for the amazing work that they did to get us to this point here tonight. But we used zero-based budgeting strategies for 3 years in a row. The budget development was based on student need and site-level decision-making, which is not the norm in many school systems. That I feel confident that we're going to meet the FY20 school committee-approved budget priorities. That this budget that I'm proposing tonight, and this is where this is going to blow your hair back, includes 14 FTE conversions in operating and 2 conversions in grants, the reduction of 5.5 positions in grants to get them off grants and onto the operating budget, and the addition of 70 new program improvement FTEs to the operating budget. It's a net gain when you take the conversions and reductions off the grant of 65 new positions, which I'll explain in a second. It sustains progress for a reduced class size K-3, capping student enrollment at 26 or under, and it adds 2 additional unassigned class size reduction positions to the budget. It expands programming for EL students to service an increasingly expanded population. We're creating new line items for operations contingency, professional development, alternative education, TBD, retiree intervention, and adaptive technologies, while continuing to support line items in technology, contingency, and preventative maintenance, which we've talked about over the last year. This budget will fund our new and badly needed K-12 assessment platform district-wide. It continues to use our new budget protocols, increasing face-to-face meetings with site-level and central office leaders. It was built to protect our human capital assets. We used the mantra, no pink slips, and we walked into our budgeting process with that at the heart of what we were trying to do. And we're proposing a transparent budget where every dollar is accounted for and the granularity of detail is accessible to all. Tonight you got your budget binders. These are the first step of the budget process. There will be things that get added to your binders, but you got all the backing documents that you need for right now, and that will keep you busy for quite some time. And then hopefully the goal in our budget is to build trust, transparency, and teamwork. And I feel that we've been able to really get a good step in the right direction to do that. So what am I concerned about? So I'm concerned about potential budget busters moving forward, that the charter school expense continues to be a large expense. Because of our accountability, we're now in the 18% cap. We used to be in the 10% cap, and that's something we need to improve in. And as of December, Fall River is at 12.47%. We could expect over the next few years for the charter schools to continue to grow, and that line item of expense could continue. Utilities, we've increased our line items to the FY18 spending levels. We're hoping that through solar expansion, we can create some potential for savings, but utilities is something that goes up every single year. Step and lane increases this year, about $3.5 million. That includes the yearly salaries covered under the collective bargaining agreements. Transportation, an increase of $500,000. We noted that we had the McKinney-Vento reimbursement, and we're finalizing the budget processes, so maybe this figure will drop. We hope it will with the secondary bid. Out-of-district sped tuition, again, something that's always increasing, but let's look at the good work that's been happening at Stone School. How many kids do we have at Stone right now? 66 students at Stone. And we just visited the other day. Did we not have an awesome day? Right, 66, we've almost doubled the population in 2 years. An amazing work that's happening at Stone. So, we're trying to keep more kids in district, but that's always something that's not perfect science. Stipends in ELT, we're studying the ELT right now and thinking about what that's going to mean in the future for extended learning time. And then the grant reductions. We've pulled $220,000 out of grants this year, but I don't know what the Title I and Title II and Title III will be next year. The federal government's been making cuts to education. So that could be something that hurts us, and that's why I've pulled those off grants, put them on operating, as we assume that money will continue to decrease. And then, of course, capital infrastructure. You never know. Boilers, windows, chillers, roofs, gutters, floors, paving, kitchen supplies. So you name it. There's always something that can happen in capital infrastructure, and I just wanted to call that out for the committee's knowledge. A little bit. Now I'll just talk about that in a second. So concurrent with this budget proposal tonight, I am also laying on the table to the committee for deliberation, not tonight, but in the future, capital requests as I see them as well. Again, it's very important that as superintendent, I'm looking at the whole picture. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't being honest with folks about what we see as capital expenses for the district moving forward. So safety and security, we're looking at replacing all our obsolete cameras and related tech equipment and replacing all our door access system with fob-activated doors. At the Henry Lord, we'd like to provide a second means of egress from parking lots at the dead-end street to enhance pickup and drop off and also improve traffic flow in the southern section of the city. Same at Sylvia. As you know, that street becomes a nightmare at drop off and pickup time. At Talbot, we get a real problem with the drainage, the parking lot, the sidewalks, the curbs, so that we can put in new outdoor PE courts and make improvements there. And then at Henry Lord, we have 2 hydronic boilers, unit ventilators, rooftop and chiller units that are going to need to be replaced soon. The problem with infrastructure is it gets old over time. And, we're funding and preventative maintenance, but we also know that we won't be able to fund these out of that line item as these costs are too excessive. So important planning budget dates moving forward. Tonight's a presentation to the school committee. We're scheduling our subcommittee meetings for February and March. Then we'll have budget deliberations March through April, and then we'll have a budget hearing sometime in May. We'll have a joint city council school committee meeting also in April, and then will submit the school committee adopted budget to the mayor by April 17th, which is a final submission to the city council by May 17th. So, as we have been customary in doing, here's the big thank you, budget recognition for an amazing job with an amazing budget development process. This is 3 months of work for us, and it's hard work, and it takes a lot of effort on behalf of the site level and central office teams, but we also want to thank our partners on the city side, Mary and Kathy Ann, for their efforts and work with us on all the figures and all of the teamwork. And of course, also the other departments of the city, fire, police, work very closely with both agencies. DPW was as well. So having said that, there is a document behind the presentation that outlines for the committee the actual budget. And it looks like this, and it has the first page of the summary, and then it has the detailed pages of the positions that we're requesting, that I'm requesting. It talks about the conversions and where they come from. Every single school is getting something in this budget. Mr. Martins, you'll be happy to know that I put it in 16 paras into the budget so that every school gets an additional para, plus 10 that we need just for our programming. So that's 26 additional paras in this upcoming budget. Mr. Aguirre will be happy that I've proposed the creation of a new position called SAC leader, SAC director. So it's 1 new SAC added and 1 guidance counselor also added to the budget. In terms of teachers, there's 16.5 teachers added to the budget, both class size reduction and second language strand positions, plus some vocational positions at Durfee. We also have put into the budget proposal the 3 curriculum leadership positions in English, math, and science that we feel are the most critical for really getting us to the ability to have that aligned curriculum that has been so elusive to us, and I think that's an important investment. I'm also adding 6 security guards, 4 custodians, 3 S-Nons, and 1 maintenance position, electrician, because of the level of work that we're doing. The high school is not getting a para, but I'm proposing that they get a SAM, and that SAM will be leading their work not only on the new Durfee, but also their accreditation. For those of you who've never been through an accreditation process, it is a nightmare, and they're going to need the additional support. And I think a SAM is the right solution to do that. When all is said and done, as I said, I'm bringing you a budget that's it's lean and mean, but it gives us back some of the capacity that we are lacking. And I can say this to you, this isn't a budget that's like, oh, we're at 110% net school spending. You're nuts. It's 101. Last year, we brought forward 101. The House number, I'm pretty confident that the House and the Senate are going to go higher than the governor's numbers, because when they recalibrate those 4 areas that I talked to you about in the Chapter 70 formula, we're going to actually get more money. Our foundation will actually grow. We're also confident that we've jacked up some line items to ensure that we have contingency in place. I jacked up contingency, I jacked up preventative maintenance, I jacked up supplies, I jacked up technology. I jacked up areas that we need to be able to get all the right tools in the hands of the teachers in the classrooms to do all the work. At 101% of net school spending, I can guarantee you that this budget will deliver on the priorities that you established, the vision of the district, the goals of the system, and really, I think, the goodwill of the folks in the field who put this together. It builds on equity. It allows positions that are needed. When we met with all of our principals and they said, here's what my need is, we listened. We were able to provide 85% of what was requested in terms of needs. And of course, we'll go through this process now with the finance subcommittee meetings, and of course the school committee can always make other decisions and recommendations. But at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that there will be more money that comes to us from the state, and I'm hopeful that we can get the support of the committee and at least a request of 101%. I think that's fair, I think it's honorable, and I think it's what our kids deserve. Having said that, let's go back up and answer some questions. Will you do me a favor? Will you give them each one of these? Please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Superintendent. There's a long way to go with the budget, certainly through the Finance Committee, but we have it before us tonight for the first time. I'm sure committee members will develop many, many questions over the coming weeks, and I encourage you to continuously communicate with the superintendent and the financial teams and ask us any questions that are necessary. At this time, are there any initial questions based on the presentation? Mr. Aguirre?
Just one, since healthcare is on the docket today, can we just talk about the 65 new positions, 75 positions, and where does that fit in, or even if you just identify the page to say what the healthcare would be?
Well, I'm going to have Kevin answer the specifics, but we added those calculations into our budget proposal.
So within your binder, in the first tab called the FY20 budget summary, page, I apologize, they're not numbered, but page 5, where you see the city costs at the bottom.
I don't see it, but go ahead.
It's in your tab called FY20 Budget Summary, and it's page 5. In the front, you should have the presentation, then it's the next tab. It's the next tab after that. So
Yep.
you'll see that I summarized it a couple pages later, but the change from one year to the other year, to the next year, is about $110,000 from this year. So what I based it on was I projected what the cost was going to be for this year, and I increased it just under 4% going forward.
And that reflects the 65 potential new positions?
That includes those positions as well, yes.
So you did that?
Yes.
Before?
I did.
So it's going to take into consideration what's the actual?
No, I took what I projected based on what we currently have, and I added additional funding for the 65 positions that we have here.
And you said it was $160,000?
It's $110,000 more than what was budgeted for this fiscal year.
So basically, it's eating up the negative, the
Yes.
1.6 thereabouts?
Yes.
But it's calculated in?
It is, yes.
All right, we just got this, so I'm sure I'll have more questions, but that was just pressing because we're
Sure.
talking about healthcare so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Again, initial. Mr. Martins?
When you mentioned, Mr. Superintendent, about the charter school of $2.3 million, does that amount include the reimbursement for charter schools?
It does. Excuse me. It does, Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry?
It does.
It does?
It does include, yes.
Okay, so
It's a net figure, Mr. Martin. So when net school spending is calculated, it takes the total expense minus the charter reimbursement, and that's the figure that net number is what is actually reported in net school spending.
So that's the actual cost. In other words, the total cost of the charter schools minus the reimbursement then leaves us at $2.3 million.
It does, yes, sir.
Okay. Second question is, Mr. Superintendent, you mentioned about the Chapter 74 career technical salaries. What you didn't mention, however, is the rate of reimbursement for a Chapter 74 student versus a regular ed student.
That's why we have an increase in that line item, Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry?
That's how we have an increase in our Chapter 70. It's one of the reasons.
Yeah, because the Chapter 74 student is reimbursed considerably higher than a regular ed student by about $5,000 per student.
I know you know that, and that's why I called out and didn't say it, and I should have said it so everyone else knew, and I apologize.
Very good, thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. First, thank you to the superintendent and his team for at least getting us started with the budget process for FY20. Obviously, over the next couple of months, the Finance Subcommittee will get to work, meeting not only with you, but your staff, talk about the proposals in this budget. I just want to caution anyone who's heard this presentation that, because we ran into the same situation last year. Last year, we talked about 101% of what the initial projection for Chapter 70 would be, the governor's number. And I believe that's the number the mayor and the city administration ultimately used as their budget for the Fall River Public Schools. The issue we ran into this fiscal year is that the House and Senate, after they reconciled the budget and went through conference committee, that Chapter 70 number actually grew from what the governor had proposed, which caused us from projecting 101% of net school spending to being just slightly above 100% of net school spending. I'm going to caution everybody that that may happen again this year. Given the discussions that have been had on the Hill regarding the Foundation Budget Review Commission, there's going to be a number of pieces of legislation, I'm sure, filed to increase educational funding, and as a result, I'm anticipating that the number that the governor's put out is going to grow again, and that's going to be a situation I think we're going to find ourselves in. So this 101 of the governor's number is really, I guess, a starting point, but I wouldn't hang our hats necessarily on that just yet. I think this is an opportunity for us to go through this budget, to take a look at what the committee's priorities are. We'll do that in the Finance Subcommittee hopefully we'll be able to bring back a budget to the full committee that we can all agree is what's needed in order to educate our students here in the district. There are a lot of proposed new positions, which ultimately we'll be going through for rationale as to why those positions will be used and why. We'll vet those, again, through the Finance Subcommittee. That is a large number of new positions. So I would say this to the superintendent and also to you, Mr. Almeida, because you're here, to be prepared for questions regarding why those positions are needed, why now, and whether or not we'll be able to sustain them in future budgets. Because right now, we've seen an increase in Chapter 70 progressively over the years from the state. If the state finds itself in a downturn and not being able to provide the number of Chapter 70 dollars they have in the past, districts like Fall River are going to have to make a decision about what we do to sustain those budgets. And with 80% of it coming from the state, I just want to caution us that as we add human capital to budgets, it also means in tough times we have to look to try to sustain human capital. We've been fortunate enough to not have pink slips, but we've been in some really good financial times, both at the state level and at the district level. So I just want to say that going forward. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I just want to be realistic financially and from a financial standpoint. The more human capital you add into a budget, obviously the more you'll have to sustain going forward. So we'll take a look at this, and hopefully when we come back, we'll also be able to add some services to the district, stay within our financial means, and provide enough financial support for education going forward in FY20. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, next is to number 6, vote to approve the job description for administrative assistant to the superintendent. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Can I?
Motion has been made.
Second
Is
with
there
a question.
Second with a question. Mr. Vice Chair?
Probably could have asked this of the superintendent prior to tonight, but I made a note of it. Is there a reason why we changed the job title now to Senior Executive Assistant to the Superintendent?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really trying to ensure is that we attract the right quality of candidate in terms of what the role is. And I thought that that was probably the best recognition of the skill set that we were looking for in the upcoming candidate.
And I can appreciate that, Mr. Superintendent. I think the caliber of individual we're looking for should be outlined within the job description, not necessarily just in the title.
Well, both. But that's why we
you know,
highlighted those in all the areas in yellow or newer additions to the.
I mean, ultimately, I guess you could call the position whatever you feel is needed. But when I read it, I didn't have the same vision of the position as that I do now. I saw it as, you know, the average person in the community who sees the superintendent as a senior executive assistant to him or her, maybe done in the future, would question, what does that person do? So if you feel it's necessary in order to draw attention to the job description, that's fine. I know we talked about briefly, you know, some of your thoughts about what the role would be and what we would classify it, but that was the first I had seen a senior executive assistant.
Right. I mean, I think that this position, this is not a clerk. This is not someone that, I mean, this is a high-level executive assistant. In law firms, they pay $250,000 for these people. The person that serves this role now is leaving me for a substantial improvement in salary and title and all those benefits. So I know when we're out talking to people, and believe me, I've been out trying to talk to folks already, one of the issues that folks said to me is it's got to be a good title. It can't just be administrative assistant. And it is the senior position in the district. In my opinion, they run the system with me pretty much 24/7.
Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Martins.
I too have a concern about the word senior in there, because it implies that there may be junior positions somewhere along the line in there. Secondly to that is we do have executive assistants already somewhere. There are executive assistant positions, are there not?
There are administrative assistants at the administration building.
They do not have the title of executive assistant?
No, executive assistant, I think the intention with the modifications that we're trying to make here, essentially that person who's in the role of the superintendent's office is really sort of the quarterback of all that administrative staff at the central administration. So from time to time, whether we're working on the budget or some other specific project, there may be a need for that person to sort of coordinate those people in order to get the superintendent what they need. So
You're telling me that there is no other title in any place that is executive assistant to somebody?
no, there are administrative assistants at the central office building.
Administrative assistant.
That's what they're called.
But not executive. There's no executive. This is the only position that would have the word executive assistant.
That's correct.
That's what you're telling me.
That's correct.
So therefore, if that's the only position that has executive assistant, then I don't understand why the need for a senior executive assistant, because it implies a junior executive assistant somewhere. And I disagree with that. I think I can accept the executive assistant, but not the assistant, the senior issue because of its implications. Secondly, is the proposed range of 58,000 to 68,000. I don't have a problem with that either, provided that is inclusive of the off-hours work that the current person is doing.
Mr. Martins, the superintendent's going to respond to you.
So, Mr. Mons, I don't disagree with you. The senior executive assistant was essentially my attempt, instead of saying someone super, it was like super duper.
Yep.
I could remove duper. You're still super, right? But if you're super duper,
No, you can,
right?
you can,
So,
you can work with
I
executive
get it,
assistants
Mr. Martins.
as well.
We can remove, maybe for the committee, it doesn't need to say senior, because we can just say executive assistant to the superintendent. That's fine. And the salary is inclusive, there is no stipends, and that's why it all says it in there. It's inclusive for all the off hours, 4 in the mornings.
Okay, with
12
those
at
two
nights.
changes, I'd
Yes.
gladly support the
Thank you, Mr. Martins.
request.
I hope you like super duper, though.
All right.
You yield, Mr. Martins?
Yes, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Just a follow-up. So this person will report specifically to you, though? So where it says immediate supervisor, that'll be the superintendent of schools?
That's correct.
In the job description, it says immediate supervisor, but that'll be the superintendent?
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll add that.
Okay. The other piece is it says supervises clerical staff and administrative assistants assigned by the superintendent. Are those the individuals, Mr. Coogan, that you
It
have
says-
indicated are already in the district?
Correct, but it also says as assigned by the superintendent. So for example, if there were a project or like assembling the budget or something like that, the superintendent says, I need you to get this person, and work on this and do this, then that would be when they're in that supervisory role. Technically, they're under the supervision of the superintendent. They would only be handling those people as directed by him.
But they'd have to be an administrative assistant.
Correct, the people at the administration building.
So you have a number of people who are already administrative assistants?
There's one to the Office of Curriculum and Special Needs.
Correct. There's also
assistant
one to-
superintendent. There's 2 in HR, and there's a 3rd in HR, there's the HR manager, who's not titled as an assistant.
So this person would have supervision over those individuals
As-
as
on an
needed?
ad hoc basis,
As needed.
yes.
Okay. Other than that, no supervisory duties?
No.
On an ongoing basis?
No.
Only as delegated by the
Yes.
superintendent?
And
Okay.
For special projects like putting together the binders.
I didn't know if this person was going to now have supervisory responsibility over those individuals.
No, that's not the intent.
Only on a case-by-case basis if
Correct.
needed.
Special
they would-
projects.
At the superintendent's direction.
That's correct.
Okay. I yield. Thank you.
Mr. Coogan?
Number 4. I had just one quick question. Monitoring, posting, and managing the superintendent's social media accounts, those are just school accounts. They're not like he's at the beach with his kids and stuff like that. We're not getting that stuff in there, right?
No, it's only the school department accounts.
It's just strictly school
Yeah, for the
department
purposes of
Yeah, the
announcements,
Twitter
et
and all
cetera.
the other
That's
stuff.
correct.
Okay.
Facebook, Twitter, and... that's
Just
what we-
school stuff, right?
Informing the
Okay.
community
I
of
don't
the
have any
superintendent's
private
actions.
Okay.
Thank God.
Thank you. Yield.
Mr. Aguirre.
So on that same note, if that's the case, I would eliminate the word superintendent, because this implies that this person would be required to manage and post on your own personal. So if you had an account that said Matt Malone, this person shouldn't be posting under Matt Malone's social media.
Right, which I don't.
Correct, but if I'm reading this, it says they'll manage yours. So let's say you
Just
chose
say-
to
well,
make a super duper Facebook page or something like that.
But it is the superintendent. But it is the superintendent's account, because we only have
Public schools account.
3 people, right, so we could just call it Fall Rivers, but I mean,
For a public schools accounts.
yeah, the official Fall River Public School accounts.
Okay.
That's it.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think you should have that in here just for your own sake, too. That you don't want somebody having access to post on your own.
Absolutely, but I just want to be clear, I don't have any of those accounts. A lot of superintendents do, I just have the Fall River account, and that's why we pretty much stay, within the information, but we can just change that to all the official Fall River Public School social media accounts.
And my other question was we don't see the old, at least I don't see it here, the old job description, but then I see everything highlighted in yellow. Am I just to assume that there's not changes, those are just total additions?
The only changes you see are the ones in yellow. Those are additions. There is no subtraction.
But there's no changes?
That's correct.
So it's, everything that wasn't in yellow was what it was before? Is that
Yes,
accurate?
that's correct.
As Mr. Costa was talking about the supervisory piece, part of me wants to predict that that's sort of bad for morale if we got a person just coming in and now they're going to be a supervisor for other administrative assistants that have been here for a long time. Is there a real need for that? Like, I didn't understand that it sounded like Mr. Coogan was saying, in a special project, like to kind of oversee or maybe to be the liaison between the super, but supervising in here, I'm not sure if that's, I don't even know where it is, but.
I'll explain that to you.
Sure.
When we put together these books, I don't know if you realize how long it takes to put together these books, and it takes at least 6 people to do it. So when I say, let's go get all hands in the building, and we're going to set up a production line, and we're going to spend 2 days putting together these books, that's what we do. So it's not supervising the people, it's supervising the projects. She's going to be responsible at the end of the day for getting them done, but it's a whole bunch of other people working on them.
I think one of the things, if I could speak, I think one of the things you've seen over the last few years is you have a much more visible superintendent who's out in the field a significant part of each and every day. When he organizes a task, he has to put somebody in charge of that task, out of his office. So sometimes it's that conference room on the second floor where he says, this is what I want to have happen, and then that person sort of quarterbacks that work while he's out of the building doing his regular routines and duties. And then when he comes back, he's checking in again, and he says, I want you to have this person do this, and this person handle that. And sometimes he goes and speaks to them directly, or he'll say, I want you to work with so-and-so to get this accomplished. That's the kind of delegation we're talking about, not anything that's an ongoing basis. All those people have regular
I
supervisors.
wouldn't call that supervising. I would say that the superintendent is directing his person to, so a superintendent tells me as his assistant, go make sure this is done. And I take supervising, maybe I'm just reading into it too much, but I take supervising meaning that person is going to be the other person's boss.
Right, but it is saying, I need you and you to come with me now, we're going to spend the next 5 hours doing this.
But they work for you, like, so
They
you're
all
going to.
work for me, but I'm not going to ask them if I'm busy, if I'm out in the field doing something.
Right, but I don't know why the supervisor, maybe it's just terminology and it's something that's not.
It's not.
And I think that was the old, right? That's not in yellow. That's something that's been in existence for, is that in yellow on this sheet somewhere?
It's not, I'm sorry. So the words as assigned, I believe clerical and administrative staff was in there previously. As assigned by superintendent might be the only revision in that. I can verify that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this person is the other person's boss, quite frankly.
No, only in those
we don't
specific
think so
assignments.
either.
Right.
Yeah, there's no evaluation.
Yeah, that's, we're
Yeah.
probably saying the same thing, but as I'm looking at this, it gives the person the right to do it. The other thing is related to the salary. Where did that range come from, and is it in the neighborhood of the other people? Is it above the other people? Like, where?
Yeah.
Similar type positions, what's the range? Is that the range for all of them?
I would say that's higher than the others, and that's based off of the last 2 years of the previous, and including any stipends or anything. It also includes a slight increase to try to attract candidates.
Yeah, it's a range.
It's just a range.
Right.
We're paying $64,500 right now.
But is there a lower range for other people that have been doing very similar type of
I wouldn't call it
executive
similar
assistant?
work, Kevin. I wouldn't call it similar work. This is a totally different job, and that position is the hardest working position in the school system.
Right, but you,
And the skill set required of that position is the most technical skill set.
so you're saying that
That's why this
we're
is a
not going to be
different
promoting
position.
somebody from within, then, I
Huh?
guess. So I guess we're not going to be promoting somebody
Well,
from
we
within
don't know. I
because they
gotta
don't have
post
the
it
skill
first.
set.
That's why I'm here tonight. We haven't even posted.
I get it, but you understand what I'm saying is, if we say that's going to be the range for some kind of skill that's above and beyond what we currently have in other areas, to me, that's implying that they don't have the ability.
I
but-
don't know, Kevin.
Yeah.
All I know is I want the best candidate.
I think the compensation reflects the skills as well as the responsibilities. There's increased responsibility at this level.
Yeah, and then we're paying where we're currently paying, the amount you just said, it has been negotiated recently, is my point. So we're starting at the floor of 58 now. It's
Right.
basically what this
That's
is.
the
So I'm just
floor.
saying that, so the person we had was doing very much what you wanted, and they did all that, and then they got recognized for that. We're just putting that floor up a little bit, is
We don't,
basically.
I mean, what happens if we get candidates in with advanced degrees and all sorts of things? We don't know. That's
No,
why
I
the
get,
range is important.
I get it. I'm just saying the range being the floor. I'm not opposed to the 68 piece, but is it beneficial to put it lower, the first part, so that you have more of a range? You're saying basically at this point, no matter who you get, 58 is got to be the floor.
Okay, I figured it out from what
You're
other
just
people-
assuming that you're going to get somebody that's what you got to pay.
Oh, I figured it out from what other people are making in the system already,
Right.
in administrative rules.
Yeah, the only other thing, and I couldn't find it, there was a couple of spots in here where the wording might be, needed to be tweaked, but I couldn't find them, so if you can just go through it again and check for grammatical stuff before we put it out. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Was made and seconded.
It was made and seconded?
Yes, it was made.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Question, though. Is the motion inclusive of everything except the word senior?
Yes,
That's what the motion is?
yes.
I vote yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes.
One more question?
On the topic that we just
Yeah, on
voted
that
on?
one, I meant to ask the
Well,
second part.
we've already voted on it.
Well, Mr. Martin's mentioned the senior, there's not going to be a junior coming out. Look, this is it. All right, I yield.
Okay, item number 7, vote to approve the second quarter budget transfer. Is there a motion? Motion has been made.
Second.
Is there a second? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Where this is on the transfers?
This is on the second quarter budget transfer, correct?
I have a question.
All right.
So we talk about the shortfall in the maintenance repair, and I think these are not necessarily big dollar amounts, but they seem to be consistently coming back and back and back. I think we just had one of these last meeting or something similar.
No, the repairs and at the last meeting, the repairs and maintenance account was over. So at the last meeting, you asked me if I was going to bring a transfer forward, which was going to cover us through the end of the year, and I told you yes.
So this is that one?
So this is going to cover us through the end of the year.
It's
yes.
not another one from the last meeting?
No, this is the first and only one that'll come forward to
Right,
you.
yeah, that's what when I saw it, I thought we just had that conversation, and then all of a sudden another one comes?
Yeah, no, so all I did last meeting was point out to you that that line item was over and that I'd be coming
Now it's
forward with a transfer to you today.
Does this have anything to do with the pool?
No.
So when the pool went down and we spent 15 grand, I think, to fix it?
Yep.
That was within,
That's in this line item here, yes.
but it's not what knocked it over?
No.
And then we cancel the rest of the season or whatever they moved for 25 that we don't,
Correct.
and that's not going to come back in here?
That's a separate, that's a fee, so we'll have to pay for them using the pool and other facilities.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, we're not going to come back and try and fix the pool. The pool's done.
The pool's done out of
Correct.
this money. The pool will now be responsible of the school building project. They're actually taking it very soon.
Okay.
They started putting the fencing up today, if you haven't seen it.
Yep, and with that, just, if you can keep us up to date, I've asked in the past for the cost-benefit analysis of even going forward with the pool.
Okay.
If we can get some data on how much usage we're going to get out of that, and whether it's worth it to do, and that might be a building question.
He wouldn't be able to answer that.
No, I don't mean you.
So you would have to come to the building committee to ask that question. They're the authority on the project. I'm not.
Right, so can I ask whoever's the member of the building committee to come back with a cost-benefit analysis of if there was ever one done on the pool in the new building? And if we can get some data on that, I'd appreciate it. Unfortunately, I can't make those meetings during the day, but...
Do you yield?
Yeah, I yield, thank you.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 8, vote to approve the year-to-date budget report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Question? Mr. Martins?
On line 519600, professional development. Okay. One, I don't know what ST stands for.
Stipends.
I'm sorry?
Stipends. So that line item in the budget for FY20 has been recoded. It's really a stipend / ELT account, because what's in that line item essentially are payments for club advisors, payments to mentors for mentor stipends. We have a CNA stipend that's paid out of there, and we've got some ELT stipends that are paid out of there. So that's just an accounting. The system itself generates that account, and that's the coding for that account number. So going forward, it'll be labeled as stipends and ELT for you going forward.
So that, I guess, that is, that's district-wide? That amount?
That's the total for that line item, but within that line item, there are, like I said, mentor stipends, there are payments for ELT, there are payments for club advisors, so on and so forth, so.
Okay. I guess I had asked that that's all contained in the professional development. That's all for work beyond the normal work day?
Yes, it is.
I have to think about that, because of the fact that I don't know, I don't know how much the actual professional development costs in there, and I would like to find out how much is the actual professional development. Now, if the fact that you have a stipend to teach a additional class or something like that, do anything on an after-school basis, that's where that would be paid from.
Yes.
But that would not be actually professional development.
No, not necessarily.
Mr. Martins, the superintendent's going to chime in.
Is it?
Superintendent's going to chime in, Mr. Martins.
You brought this up before, Mr. Martins, and I agree with you that we had one line item that had too much stuff in it. We've broken it out. The FY20 budget has very clear delineation as to what stipends and ELT, and then what is actual professional development cost. So the true cost of professional development in next year's budget, you will be able to see exactly what it is. If you would like me to send you what we spent on PD year-to-date in this Friday's email, I will.
No, because obviously I think you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to clean, I agree with you. We got to clean this up.
While I agree with professional development, right, the 101% of net school spending, but we still have the students that we have to educate, whether they are, whatever state that they're in, that's the students that we have to educate. And that's what we have the net school spending for, within that boundary. And I'm not going to give up the interest in having, even though there's 26 additional paras in the proposed budget, that is there other money that would increase the direct student instruction in the classroom, and where's that money going to come from? And in my opinion, much of it could come from direct professional development. That's my opinion.
Of course it is, Mr. Martins. I respect your opinion.
Yep,
I
thank you.
don't necessarily agree with it, but I respect it.
Okay. We'll argue about that later.
I love you.
You yield, Mr.
I
Martins?
yield.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. There are a number of items for your information.
Motion to accept and place on file?
Motion to accept and place on file has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any new business this evening? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to request an executive session this evening. I'm going to ask Attorney Assad to read the reasons for executive session, and then ask for a vote to go into executive session.
Reasons for executive session include Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to review and approve executive session committee minutes for the January 14, 2019 regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee. Also, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all administrators and employees represented by the Fall River Administrators Association, as the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the committee. Also, Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all civil service clerical employees of the Fall River School System represented by the Fall River Department of Civil Service Clerical Employees Association, as the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the committee. Also, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all paraprofessional employees of the Fall River School System represented by the Fall River Federation of Paraprofessionals, as the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the committee. In addition, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all government program employees, including without limitation paraprofessionals, parent workers, and clerks of the Fall River School System that are paid from federal/state grants and represented by the Fall River Public Schools government programs, as the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the committee. Lastly, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to review the open meeting law complaint dated January 24, 2019, filed by Colin Davis regarding alleging the Fall River School Committee's approval of the April 4, 2018 minutes was late in violation of the open meeting law. We will reconvene. There may or may not be statements at that time.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes.
Have a good one.
Mr. Hetzler?
Here.
Mr. Corey?
Present.
Mr. Martins?
Yeah.
Mayor Correa?
Are there any motions to be made following executive session? Mr. Hetzler?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the executive session committee minutes for the January 14, 2019 regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Corey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Any other motions?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
I'd like to make a motion we approve the memorandum of agreement between the Fall River Administrators Association and the Fall River School Committee regarding the Sylvia School Vice Principal and Deans of Student Support and Operations.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Corey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Any other motions?
I'd like to make
Mr. Hetzler?
another motion that we accept the memorandum of agreement between the Fall River Administrators, Administrators Association and the Fall River School Committee Director of Special Education's work year.
There's a motion been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Corey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Are there any other motions?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Made by Mr. Hetzler.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Corey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa.
Good evening, this meeting is adjourned.